Well, hey, everybody. Hope your Sunday is going strong. Hope you are having a great weekend so far. How many times this year or in the last 6 months have you said to somebody, what day is it? What is going on? Is today yesterday? There is a fog. There is a marine layer that has settled in to the calendar for all of us where time seems to be bent in 1,000 different directions. And I want to explore that together today and how you and I can find hope and clarity in 2020. See you in just a few moments, everybody.
I close my eyes and colors fly. There's no hiding from your grace. I can't deny your heart from mine and its unrelenting chase. I was on the edge of deception, caught up in my own hesitation, until your love took over me. So I let go and I let love show me life like it's supposed to be. An oasis here awaits us, all the freedom I'll ever need. Now I'm alive. Oh la la, oh la la. When I let go, then I find life. Oh la la, oh la la. When I let go, then I find life. When I let go, then I found life.
The higher way is calling me to a life unlike before. The Father's heart is beckoning, and I can't resist no more.
Lead me in the ways of devotion. I don't wanna get caught in emotions. My heart is only for you, Lord. So I let go and I let love show me life like it's supposed to be. An oasis here awaits us, all the freedom I'll ever need. Now I'm alive. Oh la la, oh la la. When I let go, then I found life. Oh la la, oh la la. When I let go, then I found life. When I let go, then I found life. So I let go and I let love show me life like it's supposed to be. An oasis here awaits us, all the freedom I'll ever need. Now I'm alive. When I let go, then I found life. When I let go, then I found life. Oh la la, oh la la. When I let go, then I found life. Oh la la, oh la la. When I let go, then I found life.
Hey everyone, hope you're doing well, and thank you for joining us today for Church Online. Before we hop into today's message from Pastor Jared, I want you to know that if you need help, we are here for you. Please just give us a call. And if you're ready to help, stay tuned after the sermon for our Good Neighbor update and learn how you can get involved. Well, I'm so excited because we are 1 week away from seeing each other again at our outdoor church service in Kit Carson Park. We're going to be right back to the spot where we have Serve Day every year. This service is going to feature live music and live teaching from Pastor Jared. We're going to do as much as we can to make this the safest experience possible. If you aren't ready to join us in person yet, that is more than okay. We're going to continue our online services every single Sunday in the same format that you've come to enjoy. You can register for Church in the Park by going to our website. And I just want to thank those of you who continually give to support what God is doing through this church. You know that we strive to be good neighbors in our community and to meet the needs of families in our church. So thank you for your investment in people's lives. And if you're in a place to give, we want to invite you to do so. You can go to crb.gives to make a contribution. Well, next up, Pastor Jared shares today's message. Enjoy.
Hey everybody, so good to be back with you today. The last couple of weeks were incredible. Special thanks to our friend Mike Foster and the teaching around Psalm 139 and the meaningful life. It was amazing. And at the same time, it's so good to be back with you today, and I'm so expectant and eager for this fall. Just a quick reminder, next week in person, we're going to be at Kit Carson Park, and we know that 300 or so of you are going to join us there, but at the same time, we're going to continue to offer our digital stream this service the same way that we have for the foreseeable future. And so if you can't make it to Kit Carson Park next week for whatever reason, don't you worry, we've got you covered right here. Well, hey, today I want to talk about this idea that is very, very personal to me, and I hope is very, very practical for you today. And it's this idea around any and every conversation that I have had over the course of the last 6 months. It seems to go the same way. Everybody seems to be saying the same thing. What day is it? What month are we in? Is today October? Did this year last for there's a dog year effect to every day, every moment that we seem to be experiencing. Engaging time or losing or keeping track of time, it just seems to be very, very difficult. And isn't it ironic, don't you think? Alanis Morissette nod right there. Thank you very much. Isn't it ironic that before 2020, that was a phrase that you used to describe, 2020 was a phrase you used to describe crystal clear vision, clarity. And isn't it true, and I think this is going to be true for generations to come, that 2020 is going to be a phrase that we use for a long time to describe fog. It's going to mean lack of clarity, mud on the windshield. I think in time it's going to get turned into a verb. I don't know what was going on. I was 2020ing right there. Everything was foggy. Everything was a little bit fuzzy. And you have certainly had that experience. I've had that experience this year over and over again. Ran across this a few days ago. I think this is a pretty good picture of what this year has been like. If you think about January, everything was normal. February, everything was normal. And then somewhere in March, I love this. Today, is it today? Are we headed towards yesterday? What is actually going on? Everybody, no matter where you are in your faith story, feels that way on the journey that is 2020. And there's actually a word for this. Psychologists call this derealization. That this is what we're all experiencing right now in the United States and in the world, derealization. And the definition of this, I didn't come up with this, is this: alteration in the perception or experience of the external world so that it seems unreal. It is a dissociative symptom that may appear in moments of severe stress. Anybody a candidate right now because of severe stress in your life, financially, at work, with raising kids, for some derealization? Just a few symptoms of what derealization is. It's a distorted perception of time and space. Anybody right there had that conversation lately? What day, what year, where are we? What exactly is going on? Here's another symptom: feeling of unreality from the world around you, as if you are in a dream or in a trance? Anybody found themselves walking to the mailbox in this sort of fog? Who cares? Just wear the pajamas at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Doesn't seem to matter in 2020. Feeling as if everything is foggy, fuzzy, or warped, all part of derealization. It's helpful to name the current cultural condition. It's a sense, I love this, of being disconnected from those around you, as if you're trapped in a bubble. Well, let's be honest, to a certain extent, you are. You're trapped in a Zoom world, relationships. I mean, there used to be a time it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you go out and see friends. Now the Amazon guy shows up and you're just excited to have human contact, for crying out loud. It's all part of the fog of derealization. And here's the reason I say that, because this may be your first pandemic, but this is not the first time that you have had these emotions or this foggy feeling in your life. In fact, you've had this anytime you've gone through a transition. If you think back on the scope of your life when you went off to college, isn't it true? When you left your house and you moved maybe to a new city, to a new university, you had new roommates, you were living in a dorm. For me, the first few months of that, an hour and a half away from home, it was foggy, it was fuzzy. There was a derealization that had settled in. You've experienced this before. Maybe it was when you got married. I know that was true for me. The first couple of months of marriage, I remember the first morning I was married, went into the shower, and I was a bar of soap, bottle of shampoo kind of guy. And I walked into the shower, my tiny little apartment. Rosanna had moved in, and all of a sudden I walk in the shower, and there's 9 bottles of conditioner and shampoo. And for 11 years of marriage, the whole shower has smelled like a produce section, just a nice waif of tangerine and watermelon and coming at you all the time. Just that feeling of derealization, a fog. What exactly is going on? Maybe it's when you had your first kid. Maybe you're in that stage or season of life right now. And when you find yourself bringing your first child home, especially, or your second or your third, there's that fog. Rhythms are gone. There seems to be, what day is it? What month is it? It just is it's derealization. Maybe for you, maybe you just moved to San Diego. Or if you've ever moved away, you know this feeling. Those first couple months, you're using your GPS on your phone to find your job or the grocery store, and everything's kind of foggy, it's fuzzy, and it's all part of a transition. And in many ways, what we're going through nationally, what you're going through personally, although it's your first pandemic, it's not the first time you have experienced these emotions. You've been through a transition before. At some point in your life, you've moved up. In your career, you've moved on from a relationship, you've moved out, you've moved through circumstances, and all of that is very, very similar to what we are experiencing individually and nationally right now in the fog of derealization. And here's what you have learned in transitions throughout the course of your life. Transitions are hard, but they are supposed to be hard. That's the very nature of transitions. And at the same time, in the middle of transitions, if you look back on your life, if you look at the scope of your life, it is in the transitions when the snow globe of life gets shaken up that you come out on the other side with some new realities, some new experiences, some things that have shaped you in powerful ways. And I think that's going to be true when we look back on 2020, that we can, through the fog, through the snow globe being shaken up, we're going to see that God was doing something. God was up to something. He was using this odd year where time seems to be warped and bent in 1,000 directions to do something on the eternal side of us in our souls and in our spirits. If you have a Bible today, I'd encourage you to open it to Exodus chapter 16. If you don't have a Bible, that's okay. You can follow along on the screens. And I want to tell one of these ancient stories, one of these beautiful stories. If you've been hanging around church for a while, it's the story of Moshe. And he's leading the people in the wilderness on what ends up being a 40-year journey. If you have been here for a while, we tell this story a lot. If you are a fan of Disney movies, it's told in The Prince of Egypt. And a little context on the story, if you're new to church, 1,000 years before Jesus comes into the world, the people of God, the Hebrew people, are slaves in Egypt. And in slave life, they live under the rule of the Pharaoh, who's the most powerful, prominent person in the world, and they make bricks 24/7. That was the iPhone of the day. That was the economic engine of the day. And 365 days a year, no breaks for making bricks. It was a miserable life. They couldn't wait to get out of it. They are making bricks day in and day out, which was a very painful process in the ancient world. Well, if you know the story, God raises up this guy named Moses, sends him back to Egypt, and he meets with the Pharaoh and he says, gives the famous speech, "Let my people go." And the people, after generation in bondage and slavery, are now free, and they begin a 40-year wandering journey through the wilderness on their way to Israel. Now, if you've ever looked at a map, there's not that much distance between Egypt and Israel. Certainly shouldn't take 40 years to get there, but their journey from Egypt to Israel, well, it looks a lot like our map of 2020. It's nonlinear. It's wandering. And the whole time they're grumbling, going, when are we finally going to make it out of this and make it to Israel? And they're frustrated. And where we find ourselves in the story, the Red Sea is parted. It's going to be a 40-year journey. They don't know that yet. And here you have 100,000 or so Israelites wandering in the wilderness. And Moses and his brother Aaron are leading them on this particular journey. And they get angry like you and I get angry in the fog and in the uncertainty and in the mystery of their circumstances. And here's what we discover. Anytime we read these stories in the scriptures, not only do they shape the world of Jesus, but let's be honest, their story is our story. Their frustrations with God are our frustrations with God. And I think there's a lot of overlap between their journey in the wilderness and our journey in this chaotic year called 2020. Hey, if you have your Bible, open it with me to Exodus chapter 16. If you don't have a Bible, that's okay. You can follow along on the screens. Exodus chapter 16, starting in verse 1. This is the word of the Lord. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which, if you've been hanging around here for a while, you know in Hebrew that translates Las Vegas. I know you're laughing at home currently, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. So how far into the journey are they? 2.5 months. And they're in this position where they're going, Moses, when are we going to make it to Israel? When is the uncertainty? When is the mystery going to cease? And they've been 2.5 months into this journey. It says, in the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. Do you remember what Egypt was? It was slavery. It was bondage. And here they are being led into new realities, new promises of God. And they're saying, we wish we were dead. We would have rather died in Egypt than be in this current circumstance, in this current situation. It's foggy, it's uncertain, we don't even know where we're going to get food is the current problem. There, they said, we sat around pots of meat in slavery and we ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Come on, Moshe. Where are we going? When are we going to finally arrive in Israel? They're looking down at their feet and they are in the land between on very shaky, uncertain terrain. And their story, man, I'm telling you, it's our story for 2020. The map of how they're going to get to Israel looks a whole lot like the map of your 2020 and a whole lot like the map of my 2020, squiggly lines headed in all the wrong directions. And if you read their story, here's what you discover. They would prefer that which is miserable to that which is mysterious. And this is true in transition. This is true when circumstances get hard. This is true when all of a sudden we find ourselves faced with a lot of uncertainty. We would prefer, just like Israel, that which is miserable to that which is mysterious. I mean, we do this as human beings all the time. We stay in relationships, we stay in jobs, we stay in circumstances that we don't necessarily like, but at least it's certain. And there's something in the human heart that resists mystery. There's something in the human heart that when things get shaky or uncertain, we begin the process of shriveling up and becoming terrified because we can't see where the destination is going to lead. If you drill down on their story, I think this is true for a lot of people in our world, they wouldn't just prefer misery to mystery, they would actually prefer death to mystery. You catch what they said in there? If only we would have died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. Man, we would rather be going through anything and everything than what we're currently going through. When are we going to make it to Israel? There's something about mystery that's painful. And let's be honest, it's part of what's painful about this year. It's part of the fog of derealization. Anywhere, everywhere you look in 2020, it's mysterious. It's uncertain. You have incredible uncertainty right now about whether or not school's going to open up in the fall. You have incredible uncertainty at your job. How in the world are you going to navigate this position and customers in the current climate that we find ourselves in? If you're a leader in your company, how am I going to lead this team in this particular moment when all the stakes seem to be higher and there's less certainty than ever? In any and every area of life, the fog of mystery has settled in. That's just the nature of this year. Mystery, mystery, mystery. I found this the other day, just as a quick reminder of how weird of a year it's been. In January of 2020, I bought a planner. You can see this, 2020 plan. And I was really excited. I was going to punt on the digital planner life because that's a whole other sermon for another time. And I was going to start writing things down, pen and paper, getting my schedule together, man. I was so eager to do this, goals, everything. And I'm probably going to put this on eBay this afternoon because it's very, very unused, as you can see, because any plan you are going to make this year, it's uncertain. When are we getting to Israel exactly? Time is warped. Space seems warped. What day is yesterday? It's all foggy. And here's what I know about you. And this is true at any moment of your life in transition or in mystery. When you are in the land between, which we all are, when you are in mystery, which we all are, this is a season, just like Israel, where your faith will either thrive or it will shrivel up and die. When you are in the middle of mystery, your faith will either shrivel up and die, or it will be the very sustenance and the source of life that keeps you going. In fact, if you look at over the scope of your life, if I were to ask many of you, when did you find yourself in that stage of life? When did your faith flourish the most? When did you find God? And for many of you, the answer to that question, it would be in a transition. It was when you moved out of the house and you moved off to college and you met that sorority sister who was praying for you. That's where your faith began to flourish. It was after that first marriage ended and all of a sudden life felt so shaky and you found yourself in church and your faith began to flourish. It's in transitions where our faith can begin to thrive in the land between. On the other side of the coin, isn't it true that the land between transition, when are we going to make it to Israel, is often where our faith can die? I mean, some of you, if I were to ask you, when did you walk away from church? Some of you, maybe you're coming back to church for the first time, kind of checking this God thing out for the first time in a long time. If I were to ask you, when did you walk away from faith? It's when you went to college. It was in your 30s when you got that new job and you moved away from that church that you've been a part of for 20 years. It was in a transition where you lost the very thing that mattered the most. And this is what I know is true of all of us when we look back on the story of 2020. In the fog of derealization, one of two things will be true of you. You will either gain crystal clarity in 2020 about what matters the most to you, faith, family, friendship, or, isn't it true, you see this already, in the fog of 2020, in the fog of derealization, you will lose sight of the things that matter the most. One of two things will happen when you look back in 2030, 2040, and you tell the story of this year. Only one of two things will be true. You will either look back and say, in the fog, I gained crystal clear clarity about what matters the most. Faith, family, friendships, or you will look back and say, that was the year I got dislodged from purpose and hope. Do not let it be the latter, because the mystery, the land between, is actually there to invite us into a faith that flourishes. All the sort of snow globes been shaken up emotions and feelings you have this year are actually invitations from God to experience Him in new and in profound ways. Yet at the same time, it's human nature to resist transition. It's human nature to resist mystery, to prefer anything to that which is mysterious. And part of the reason, if you drill down on that, has to do with human beings, your relationship and my relationship with time. Now, we don't think about this very often. We don't think about time very often. And we think about, what time am I playing golf, or what time is the lunch meeting at? But we don't think about our relationship to time and how it's sort of a running in the background all the time of our life. And it informs our decisions. It informs our happiness. It informs how we think about the world. To try to set this idea up, let me try to explain it this way. Several years ago, actually probably in the 1920s or 30s, Albert Einstein was trying to explain his theory of relativity and trying to help people. And as he would often do, he crystallized it in a very simple way. And he said this, he says, when a man sits with a pretty girl for an hour, it seems like a minute. But let him sit on a hot stove for a minute, and it's longer than any hour. That's relativity. And here's the reason I say that, because in many ways, the reason why this year, why August feels expanded, why maybe July felt shorter, why your relationship to time, it's foggy, it's fuzzy, is because this year, in many ways, especially compared to the rest of your life, it has been a hot stove that you are sitting on. And there's something about this feeling, there's something about this emotion that changes your relationship to time. And if you go back in human history, if you keep drilling down on this idea, you can see how human beings have always related to time. And this really is what informs, in many ways, your mood, your happiness, how you evaluate, how you look at your life. And it informs, and we're going to see this in a minute, why you have that foggy feeling. If you step back with me for a minute, all the way back in ancient history, our ancestors' in ancient history, this would be true in the Old Testament, they had what was called a cyclical view of time. A cyclical view of time. And essentially what that meant is, this was how they looked at the world. They would walk out in the morning and they would observe that there was a certain pattern to how the world worked. It was cyclical. The sun comes up, the sun goes down, seasons come, seasons go. And they observed from looking out at the world, well, that must be how life works. And so consequently, in ancient societies, the goal was not to advance or to create progress in technology. The goal was simply to repeat that which you had already experienced. This is why when you look at technology over the course of thousands and thousands of years, you would get the wheel, and then thousands of years there was nothing else, because the goal was not to progress or to experience progress. It was just to repeat that which you had already seen. The goal was to say, well, that's great. We've seen that before. But over time, and this is how you and I relate to time, that attitude began to change. And somewhere around late antiquity, this is the years 300 to 600 AD, attitudes towards how we view life, how we view time have shifted. And now we live in a world where we have not a cyclical view of time, we have a linear view of time. There's a chronological order to how things work. In many ways, the Bible was a reason for this, because this is around the time the Bible is going to get canonized and crystallized in the form that we have it. And the Bible, in many ways, it appears linear. You have the kings, you have the prophets, you have the life of David. It's all from Abraham to David to Jesus. There's sort of a linear fashion to the Bible. And that began to inform how the world viewed time and how we view our lives. And so the reason why you look at life the way you do is because you have a linear view of life. And here's what that means. It means that your life, you view it as a series of shoulds. You get to a certain age, I should be going off to college. You get to a certain age, I should be getting married. You get to a certain age, well, we should be having a kid. Why? Because that has been the pattern that has been set there from our culture and from our society. We use this language to talk about anything and everything. Well, he's having a midlife crisis. Well, he's ahead, she's behind. According to who? According to this sort of unwritten linear code of how life should work. In the 1970s, there was a book that sort of crystallized this, at least for our generations, and it was called Passages by Gail Sheehy. And in the book, she said there's sort of 4 adult passages, and even if you've never read the book, it's informed your life. There's the trying 20s, there's the catch 30s, I think there's the forlorn 40s. There's all sort of these categories of what you should be experiencing and when you should be experiencing it. And here's the problem with that. Here's why I say all that. Because our God is not a cyclical God, and he is not a linear God. When you read the stories of the scriptures over and over again, whether it's Job, whether it's Peter, the story of Egypt or the people of God going from Egypt to Israel, that is how God often operates with individuals. I mean, be honest, that's how he's operated with you. Things have not happened according to the plan that you thought they were going to operate according to. And God is very non-linear in the way that he operates with humanity. And if we get even more specific, here's why this is good news. Because when I sit down with many of you, if you were to tell your story today, and when you tell your story to other people, your story is a very non-linear story, isn't it? In fact, I can't tell you how many times I talk to people when I'll say, hey, tell me a little about your family or tell me a little about yourself. And you'll say, well, it's kind of a weird story. You know what you mean by that? You mean there is a linear map for how life is supposed to operate, and my life has not operated according to that code and that map. I mean, think about your story. You were supposed to get married at 30. Instead, you were having your first kid at 23. You were supposed to be getting your promotion at 40. Instead, you were back in school trying to figure out your life and what you were going to do with your career. You were supposed to be celebrating your 25th wedding anniversary to your high school sweetheart. Instead, you were going on your first date trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces of life. Maybe it's this year. You were supposed to be moving into your first house. Instead, you're moving back in with your parents. A non-linear life over and over again. You were supposed to be retiring this year and setting up for a life of leisure and travel. Instead, markets have gone unstable. You're not quite so sure when you're going to be retiring, and you could not get to Europe right now if you wanted to. It has been a non-linear life where nothing seems to ever go according to the plan, and you are constantly standing there with your hands on your hips going, when are we going to get to Israel? The linear plans just seem to go up in smoke over and over and over again. And the master, the creator, the ultimate inviter God, through all the non-linear moments and movements of our lives and certainly of 2020, is inviting us to experience life in a new way and experience him in a new way, where even when we lose control, we can still taste and see that the Lord is good, and trust, because that is the bedrock of our faith, and that is ultimately what we need to hold to when everything seems to go in a way that we didn't plan or we could not possibly expect. And isn't it true? I mean, if we're just honest, the recipe for misery in life is to hold to some chronological, linear way that everything's supposed to operate. I mean, the most miserable person in the room is always the person who's the most certain of what should be happening. Ever notice that? Not just about themselves, but about everybody else. Well, he should be getting married about now. She should have a job by now. It should be this way. It should be that way. And if you want to be miserable, man, you just have to be certain about what should be happening in 2020 in your life that's not happening because of a global pandemic and 1,000 other reasons. And it's letting go. And the recipe for misery is trying to shoehorn a linear life into a non-linear mindset. It's what creates all the fog. It's what creates all the what's going on, because nothing seems to be happening the way that it's supposed to. When are we going to ever get to Israel? Maybe if you like math, here's the way that we could say it. A linear mindset added to a non-linear reality, which is this year, well, that's what creates all the derealization, the fog, the funk, the which way's up, the which way's down. It's not going the way that it's supposed to go. And you say, well, that sounds nice, but what in the world do I do with that? And let me just encourage you today to embrace the nonlinear life. Let me encourage you today to embrace the nonlinear movement of 2020. And to be like bamboo, bending a little bit in the storm with the direction that it's blowing, because you can't control, and control is just an illusion anyway. The linear life, the linear heart, and I type A, racehorse, I get it, I'm the exact same way. But here's the problem with the linear life. In the linear life, you're in control. You're in charge. And we like it that way. And the linear life is all about expectations. It's why when you live that way, you can never be happy, because anything that happens, you say, well, of course, that's what I expected to happen. And it's letting go of that pattern and that way of life and embracing the nonlinear life where God wants to work with you and God wants to work in you, often like he wants to work in Israel. And it's not in a way that says we're going straight from A to Z. It's a way that says we're going zigzag all over the place and you don't know what's going to happen. And the nonlinear life says, God, you're in charge. I don't know where I'm going. I just know the one that I'm following. And you're in charge. And the nonlinear life is when we start letting go of all of our expectations. And all of a sudden, when we let go of our expectations, on the other side of them, we start to see all the invitations that God has laid on the path for us to walk through the wardrobe and experience him in ways that we have never experienced. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to tell a linear story anyway. You don't want to get to the end of your life and say, well, that all went exactly according to plan. You want to look back and say, you know, there was a season, there was a moment, there was an opportunity, there was something in there where I didn't think that was going to happen, and it happened. I never saw 2020 on the map and on the plan, and it happened. And in the middle of it, I saw it as an invitation to taste and see that the Lord is good. I saw it as an invitation to see clearly that which really matters. Wouldn't it be beautiful if you look back on this year and the story that you told is that all the things in 2019, 2018, 2017 that you thought were so important gained their proper place in your heart and in your life, in God, in faith, got elevated. What you knew should have happened all along got elevated to the top of the list. That's when you begin to let go of the expectations and you start to receive the invitation, just like Israel did, to put one foot in front of the other on a very quirky and unstable path of trusting God in the wilderness of life. And when we begin to do that, I'm telling you, we start to see and experience God in ways that we had never seen or experienced God. That's what I want for you in the fog of 2020. Let's pray together. God, I thank you. It never goes the way that we wanted. That's our greatest frustration with you. But God, if we could see on your side of eternity, we would also be able to see that the thing that we get angry at you for is ultimately what we would fall on our knees and thank you for, that it never seems to go the way that we wanted. And I know for so many people this year, maybe somebody woke up this morning and said, well, today, honey, we were supposed to be on our trip. We were supposed to be on the cruise. It's just another reminder of a year that hasn't gone the way anybody thought. And would we not view it as busted expectation after busted expectation? Would we see it as invitation after invitation to see God, to have our snow globe shaken up? And this week, would we lean our ears, shift our eyes to the God who's been guiding and leading us the whole time? And would we let go of that powerful idea of control? And would we be reminded that you're in charge, not us? We step foot on the nonlinear path this year, God, and we trust. And we're not going to have certainty, but would you give us clarity about who's in charge? And it's you. It's not us. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. And all of God's children said, amen. Grace and peace, my friends.
The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. Oh, my God will never fail. Oh, my God will never fail. 'Cause I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. There's power in the mighty name of Jesus. Every war he wages, he will win. Oh, I'm not backing down from any giant. 'Cause I know how this story ends. Yes, I do. Yes, I know how this story ends. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Belongs to you, Lord. 'Cause you take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. you turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Oh, you take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Oh, you take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. 'Cause I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord.
Hi everyone, thanks to Pastor Jared for sharing today's message. I hope you found it as helpful as I did. This past week was amazing. Over 300 of you showed up right here at the church for Good Neighbor Day. We all braved the heat wave in our parking lot for a few hours, and you packed 450 gift bags for struggling military families, 600 sack lunches for hungry people in our community, 1,000 homeless care kits, and 100 senior care kits. Not only that, but we also donated food and clothing to low-income families. This is what a Good Neighbor church looks like. Thank you to all of you who showed up for the neighborhood.
Good Neighbor Day is just something that we're able to share with our neighbors and just reflect the love of God, and we're just so pleased to be able to serve.
We got to do the military bags today, and we're just so happy that we got to put together cute little bags that we can send off so military families can have a wonderful movie night. Any little part of that we can contribute just brings joy to our hearts.
As you know, there are a lot of military families who live here in San Diego. What you may not know is how greatly the pandemic has affected those families. This week, Pastor Nate spoke with STEP, a nonprofit that supports local military families. Listen to what Tony Tervainen, the founder of STEP, had to share.
Almost 10% of our military is actually stationed here in San Diego County. The things that we can do to help them, to re-inspire them, are magical to us. The support of the local community is tremendous to us. That's in the cash funding, that's in the volunteer hours, and then that's also in the donated goods. That little moment where you can see the kids laugh, you can see mom smile, and to see somebody crying, so thankful that you're giving them something, that's changing back for us. Thank you for that support. It really makes a difference.
We know many parents are feeling as if they are at the end of their rope. Juggling work and kids and homeschooling is difficult. Well, we love our parents and think they deserve some extra love and encouragement, so this week we delivered a special message to them. Thanks to all of our CRB Kids families, and a special thanks to parents for being rock stars. We love you. Are you ready to be a good neighbor? Visit thechurchrb.org/forourneighbors to get involved.
Thanks for tuning in for Church at Home. Here are a few ways to stay engaged and spiritually connected. We believe giving is an act of worship just like singing, praying, or serving others. Giving is a way to express our love for God. If you're in a position to give, we invite you to visit crb.gives for simple and secure giving. Have you downloaded our app yet? It's for more than just Sunday. Listen to worship music, watch midweek content, and much more. Thanks for watching.